Hi, welcome to the DRH show, where I have wide-ranging conversations with fascinating people. We talk about all things psychology, mental health, and wellness. Today, I'm joined by a psychotherapist, Jen Du. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Denise, and it's good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here, Jen Du. And let's kick this off with you telling us your background, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Okay, so that's quite a long story. So I was born in China. I came to the UK 15, 16 years ago. So I worked in media professionally for 8 to 10 years, and then before changing career into psychology. So I'm now practice as a psychotherapist and a mindfulness teacher, and I'm particularly have an interesting in developing culturally sensitive psychotherapy approach for ethnic and minority groups. Yeah, thank you.
We'll dig deeper into what you do as a psychotherapist, but I just want to understand what's your typical day like, because I would imagine that your role as a psychotherapist has dramatically changed as a result of the lockdown. But Jen, can you just give us a snapshot of what your typical workday is like?
So I have a few different posts. So I typical workday are see clients, a one-to-one. I have a private practice, and I also have at the moment I have a project working with NHS, so I'm running groups, narrative groups, and also have a one-day teaching in the university. So it's a bit mixed, really. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for sharing to us the snapshot of your typical day. It's really quite engaging. It's really quite dynamic. But earlier, Jen, you mentioned that you were originally from China. So can you give me a picture of the mental health landscape within the Chinese community?
Well, that's a very good question. You talk about Chinese community in the UK.
Yes, probably you could give us, a Chinese community in the UK and also the community in mainland China.
So I don't know much about community in mainland China, because most of my apart from I work with Chinese clients. I think Chinese community in the UK, from the literature, has been described, study research 20 years ago has been described as invisible population. So when I 6-7 years ago, when I work at a few posts working in NHS, what I noticed is in mental health field, very few Chinese clients access to mental health treatment. So particularly talking therapy. So that's how I guess interest started with culturally sensitive therapeutic approach. Yeah. So the when I work in an NHS, I've never met any Chinese clients. So I did some survey with other psychologists, psychotherapists in a different part of the country in the UK, and the response very similar. They rarely see any Chinese clients in talking therapy as a client. So that doesn't mean Chinese population doesn't suffer from anxiety and depression and so on. So that's began my interest of investigate more. So there's many research suggested including National Health Institution research 20 years ago, Chinese population is invisible groups in public health services. So Chinese clients underutilize the public psychological services, and this my own experience working in NHS, and also the research, and also by doing survey with other colleagues across different trusts. So there's a literature also suggests Asian women, for example, have a high prevalence of anxiety, depression compared to white women. So there's many studies on the barriers for Chinese community access to mental health services. For example, social, cultural, linguistic needs, and then the language barrier, social culture barrier, and then also lack of awareness of mental health services. Also, some studies suggest that the perceived discrimination from professionals. I think culturally, understanding mental health problem between Western psychotherapy and Chinese have huge disparity. Understanding, for example, the Chinese, when sometimes people who in the Chinese population, people might complain they have if they stress, anxiety, but they might complain they have a stomach pain or headaches, rather than talk about the anxiety and the stress because certain things impact on them. Also, the culture of shame, or keep everything underneath, keep things within the family, and in a way also potentially add up the barrier to access to mental health services. I do see Chinese clients in private practice, but what I'm trying to emphasize in public health services, it's such underrepresented, as a population.
Now, Jen, let's talk about your work as a psychotherapist. What would you say are the challenges of working in private practice? Because you've been in private practice for quite some time now.
Oh, Denise, there's many challenges. I suppose in private practice, I suppose compared to NHS work, private practice, it's more dynamic. And so in NHS, you don't need to worry about the client. This is such a long waiting list. So you, you have the opposite problems. In private practice, I suppose the clients have more power. They can choose who they want to work with. So for me, it's very exciting. I was curious about why clients come to work with me, and particularly if there's a culturally linguistic need, if there's cultural linguistic needs, or actually the clients want the therapist doesn't remind of their family members. So it's ethnic matching or not matching. So it varies. I suppose the challenges in private practice, you have to be very organized, booking and the administration side of it, and also for me is I have a good network, and also supervision and self-care. That's also a very important part. Sometimes it can be very busy and don't have a time for myself. So that's another thing to be constantly remind myself. I need to look after myself, so I can look after others.
Mm-hmm. But in spite of the busy schedule of being a psychotherapist, what would you say shall we say, how has become a psychotherapist changed you?
Oh wow, it changed me enormously. I think it just helped me to really connecting with the whole thing of being human. And it's a really humbling experience. So I speak English as second language. So I work with I work with Chinese population as well as English speaking population. I think it just opened the doors for me to actually just sharing that human experience, and then changing me as a person, like, more humble and just more appreciate the privilege of being in this field. And people come to you and share the maybe the darkest part of their life, and they can't share with somebody else. So for me, it's a huge privilege. And changing me as a person. I think it just more accepting things when things are coming to life, and also just more appreciating what life's offering me. My life journey has been, and I just feel very fortunate to be a therapist, to be able to support people go through their journey. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, of course, psychotherapists, they have different approaches when it comes to, giving sessions. But I was navigating your website and you have your own approach. So could you please tell me about your innovative approach to Chinese calligraphy enhanced therapy, or CCET? Please tell us more about this.
Okay, so Chinese calligraphy enhanced therapy is a therapeutic approach I developed during my doctoral training. So the idea is when, based on the understanding theory and clinical practice, as well as my personal therapy experience. So I'm a mindfulness teacher. So this approach is very culturally embedded. So Chinese calligraphy handwriting, I don't know if you know, has thousands of years history as a mindfulness practice. So there's many studies on calligraphy practice enhance well-being. And for example, the study on calligraphy practice enhance people's cognitive abilities, improve executive function and working memory, also reduce hyperarousal and depressive symptoms. So most of the study has been done in Asia. And also studies on Chinese calligraphy are not very clear about what they've been writing, how long is the session. So I developed this culture sensitive and non-threatening approach. So basically, it was a Chinese calligraphy handwriting. I use the whole traditional method. So the clients come to the session, they will be, prepare the brushes and prepare the pen, the ink, use ink, grinding inkstone, make ink, and also prepare the paper. So this is a very non-threatening approach. So people, particularly in the Chinese community, they're familiar with this approach. So they probably practice in school since, from the school young age. In this 4-session approach, I integrated the cognitive theory, mindfulness theory, and the psychodynamic theory. So it's like a 4-session protocol, but it can be expanded. The idea is through calligraphy characters and the familiarity of a calligraphy experience, access to their problematic experience, and turn them into resources. So the distinctive feature of CCET is so every session we're starting with mindful breathing and the grounding techniques. And the therapist and the client will spontaneously grind ink and prepare the calligraphy writing together. Both they prepare their own sets spontaneously, and the therapist also use calligraphy writing to take notes. So that's very different from traditional talking therapy. Traditional talking therapy, 1 room, 2 chairs. So here, therapists and clients both use the same material, same equipment, really promoting that equality. Therapists encourage a client to use calligraphy brush to write down their thoughts, feelings, whatever come to their mind, and then unpack from there. So they're also reflecting on the characters together. So clients can keep their own calligraphy writing. There's the similarities between calligraphy, this approach, and kind of talking therapy. For example, empathetically attunement. So therapists attune to clients' body language, and as well as their writing and their speaking, and also importance in the therapeutic relationship. The clients feel safe with the client, with the therapist, and there's implicit, explicit communications. And if I have to say something, in the work, perhaps it's the clients could take almost a short mental shortcut to their mental experiences. So, for example, in a culture with hierarchy structure, the idea of Confucians, the hierarchy structure. So if you ask a client what they're feeling about let's say mother, grandparents, if they had some really negative experiences, it's difficult for the person to articulate that kind of negative experience. But if you ask them to write whatever come to their mind, and then you explore from there, and in some ways make the process much easier for the client. That's the rationale anyway. Yeah. Okay.
This actually sounds like expressive writing. It was introduced by James Pennebaker in the 80s, where you allow people to express themselves through writing and talk about psychological trauma. Is that what it is like?
It's slightly different because with the calligraphy is you in this approach is most of the clients I actually found it's very comforting, soothing when they grind in ink. So it's a very mindful preparation. So I don't use ready-made ink. The clients come to prepare themselves, and then if they never had an experience before, they could see what therapists, how they don't do it, and they can and we'll have some sort of preparation together. It's a very mindful, because with calligraphy writing it's very slow. So let's say this is my pen, fountain pen. If I'll hold my pen like this, I'm writing like that, so probably, I don't know, depends on the speed of your writing. So you 1 minute you write it quite a bit, maybe 10-20 words. With the calligraphy brushes, it's much slower. You're holding the brush. I don't have it with me now. You holding like this. Yeah. You use your whole body, whole upper body, the movement with not just the wrist, your whole arms and upper body. So you're writing in a way. It's very mindful. You're more aware what's going on with your body. I don't know if that makes sense. So in some cases, the clients will find actually preparing the material with the therapist together is very soothing, and they're really building up the intimacy of being in this together. Yeah, rather than taking different approach, the therapist, you come here with the problem, I'm here to support you. This is in my view, it's a much more intimate. Okay. I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, definitely. And of course, you are expected to have prior knowledge to fully benefit from CCET, rather than just, taking it as a chance for you to kind of, improve your skills on the Chinese calligraphy. Is that right?
That's right. So in this practice, in this kind of approach, the client doesn't need to have any calligraphy experience. It's not about the aesthetic side of calligraphy, but it's more about embedded in mindfulness, and then also expressing their feelings and thoughts, and using the calligraphy. I use this approach, as I said, it's a really slow process. Often the clients find this whole process very calming, soothing. So it's quite complex, the process, but it's also quite simple. Yeah.
And as you've said, Jen, this is really embedded within the notion of mindfulness. And I was also checking your website, and there is a space there where you said that mindfulness is simply an intention and there is no required result. Well, what do you think that is?
So in this Western world, currently I'm a mindfulness teacher. So currently mindfulness, if you think about in a public health, often is the treatment like MBCT, MBSR. For me, it's intention. It's the way of being. So there's a formal practice like a 20 minutes body scan, 30 minutes body scan, maybe 5 minutes breathing, all this into package. But I think that might be suitable for some people. Mindfulness is such a it's a concept. It's a very broad concept. For me, it's the intention to be mindful. It's a way of being, a way of being with the world. Like now, we have this conversation, right? It's isn't it fascinating? We never met before, and then we engage in this topic. So I'm very aware that my position when I'm sitting here, and I'm hoping to engage with you in a kind of just in this space. We're both present, yeah.
Absolutely.
Even though we're not in the same room, but we're present in this room. We engage each other. So this is very mindful, yeah. It just, for me, yeah, just a way of being with the world. Yeah.
And that notion of being present is really more important than now, because they say that internet made us really more connected than ever, but it's also interesting because it's supposed to make us connected, but it also kind of segregates us from other people. We have access on the internet, we can talk from anyone in the world, but when was the last time we actually spoke to our neighbor? When was the last time that we spoke to our parents? So yeah, it's really important that we have to cherish this notion of mindfulness. But just moving on a slightly different topic, I understand, Jen, that you were recently a panelist at a webinar entitled Insights into Meanings and Practices Across Culture. Can you please tell us more about this panel talk that you were part of?
Okay, so this it was organized by British Psychological Society. So so we have a panel of I think of 3-4 psychotherapists from different culture. So we talk about therapeutic approach across cultures. So for me, I bring the Chinese calligraphy enhanced therapy as it's a development as an integrative approach, but it has a heavily culture basis. So it was a really wonderful discussion and conference, and I really enjoy interacting with other psychotherapists come from different culture. This like for example from Muslim culture, and then there's another in Africa, grandma's benches, this. So I think all of those make it very exciting because, we are working with people from all walks of life and different backgrounds. So the traditional psychotherapy approach, in the room, 2 chairs, that kind of approach is a very Western. It's like, it might work, it works for some people, but not work for everyone. So I think this the notion of understanding and with culture sensitivity to thinking, the connecting with the client in a way they feel familiar with, they feel not intrusive. It's very important. Yeah.
Now, Jen, you co-authored a paper with Dr. Underfield entitled Adolescence, Peer Friendship and Anxiety and Depression Among First-Generation Immigrant BAME Families in the UK. Can you share to us the main finding of that study?
Wow, I'm gonna dig up some memories. So the topic I did was when I did my master at Sussex University Experimental Psychology. So that the topic is compare adolescent from BME first generation immigrant family and compare with white so adolescent. So I did a study from I think I did from 3 schools. So it was kind of really interesting, compare social anxiety and peer friendship. So that's, I mean, I encourage, if the reader is interesting, to have a look in the detail. It was collaborating with the Professor Andy Phil. So there's lots of complex stats. I don't feel I can comment on those. Yeah, that's and that contribute to Andy. But yeah, the research I found was very meaningful, and it was really interesting. And that field, for particularly for first generation of immigrant children, is understudied. So although it was a quantitative study, when I did the survey in the schools, a few students actually say to me, young people actually say to me, no one have ever asked about their feelings. Sometimes they have to act as a translator for their parents, the interpreter for GP, to other dealing with many other things, but no one have ever asked about their experience. And there was a quite again really humbling experience. It is something still very important part of me to improve immigrant and particularly from ethnic minority background, with language barriers and culture barriers, how to enhance their well-being, to provide the support for those young people from their family.
Absolutely. And Jen, you also won the UK Council for Psychotherapy Member Research Fund competition in 2020. Do you have any tips for those who also aim to win the competition?
I don't. I know. I just joking. I don't know. It was a really. I think only tips is go for it. It was very competitive, and I didn't think I didn't think it too much. I just thought I have interesting project, and I want to give a go, and yeah, just go for it and see how it goes. And I think yeah, I feel is absolutely honor, because it's really very competitive. I think in many ways I felt the grant really helped me in terms of as a researcher and boost my confidence, and in this CCET approach, because that's that the doctor is about case study participant uses this approach. So I'm just really humbling for the experience and the award. And I think for I don't have a tips on writing, because I don't think I am, there's the many people could offer you tips on how to writing perfect applications. I think for me was just genuine and have a belief in my project. And then I spoke to my supervisor, and they were very supportive. Yeah, just go for it. And I just did. And that was that. So yeah, it's I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
Just go
Definitely.
for it.
Yeah. I think if there's novelty and there's value in your proposal, and that would speak for itself. But of course, the way you structure and the way you write your proposal, that would also help. But as you've said, just go for it, give it a chance. It's not going to be lethal. Refusal is not lethal. So just go for it.
Yeah.
Now, Jen, I understand that there's a downloadable presentation on your website titled Connection and Healing. Please tell us more about this presentation.
I think that presentation was one of the one I did for Chinese community during I think it was May last year. It was during lockdown. So I don't know if you if you know that an early stage of a COVID, and there was a lot of racism against Chinese community in the UK. So I did a Zoom talk I was surprised. I think it was more than 50 people attended for that talk and presentation. So the idea was to understand and within the ethnic minority community, like Chinese community, the anxiety of and anger of the feeling injustice about racism against the Chinese. There were at the time was a lot of there was talk about it's called COVID. It's called Chinese virus. So I was invited to the talk for a Chinese community, and then I did. It was a really humbling experience. People from different part of the UK attended. So we did a various of exercise and tried to unpack our feelings. It was really, again, for me, it was very helpful and rewarding day because I've talked to people I've never met before. I think it was over 50 participants, and so I felt at the time we are connected. Even online as online community, we were connected. We did a various of exercise, psychological exercise. We also did one of the Tree of Life. That exercise link our ancestor, the root and the culture root, and to their now the achievement, or feeling proud in life. So it's quite interesting as well. So that exercise also received lots of positive comments. So yeah, this was one of my voluntary work for the Chinese community during early COVID period.
Okay, and of course, that is freely downloadable on your website. So for anyone who's interested to learn more about that piece of work, just go to your website and then have a look at it. Now, I was wondering, Jen, if you're aware of some of the criticisms of your approach in psychotherapy, because at the core of your approach is basically you're telling that people should be, have a space for psychotherapy that matches their own race and that matches their own ethnicity. Now, of course, there are some people who say that isn't that kind of segregating people, or just encouraging, not really encouraging people to fully assimilate into that chosen culture. And I have to be honest with you, I'm one of those people. The idea of you might find it interesting because we have the same heritage. My mother is Chinese.
Okay.
And that the idea that I have to look for someone who looks like me doesn't really resonate with me. I'm one of those people who don't really care whether the person in front of me looks like me. I'm colorblind. So what would you say is, what would you say to people like myself that we don't really, kind of overlap with your approach?
First of all, I say I don't against people. I think I actually support people, find therapists who's not culturally or ethnic matching if that's make them feel more comfortable. So I don't, I think it is, for what I see, your English so fluent, and then if you feel have some therapists with completely different culture background, then you can open up. I would say go for it. Why not? Yeah, I think when I developed this CCET with the intention was the invisible population is the Chinese community don't access to mental health service in NHS. So that was the intention, to bridging the community access to public health services. So I think I have no problem. I think I think this is not conflict at all. It's about giving people choices. Yeah, because if the client who's suffering from mental health problems, but they have linguistic culture issues, where those people go to? So I don't have any issues. I fully agree. This ethnic matching and not matching, they both have pros and cons. I think for me is I have, most of all my therapists are not Chinese. There's not many Chinese therapists around, so I think but I'm aware I'm in a very privileged position. So I have, I speak English, not fluent but good enough, and I have experience working here and have high education here, so I understand the culture very, not very well, but fairly well. But that the privilege I'm carrying is not everybody got that privilege.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And thank you for enlightening me on that area, Jen, too. Okay, so Jen, you've been within the psychotherapy sector for quite some time now, so I'm quite sure that you've come across a number of misconceptions about psychotherapy or even about mindfulness. So if you could just mention some misconceptions and then sort of address those misconceptions.
I think you mentioned about the mindfulness. I think I mean, with mindfulness, there's plenty of research now in both public health services, also in psychology, psychotherapy literature. I think for me, is you talk about the addiction, and I think for me, it's just every every time every client to me is a new experience. We all have a bias, judgment, and that's a part of who we are as a human being. I think for me it's about keep my mind open and willing to update my judgment. So for example, people who think about mindfulness, those are hippies, and but not all. Some have said, oh, that's not me, I'm not gonna go for the that. It's a really interesting, because for me, mindfulness is something, it's a quite a way of a life. If you see young baby, they're very mindful. For example, they're very mindful there may be certain toys they like to play with, and they're interested in the texture. This is it's not something I think it's Eastern. Yeah, I think it's just part of a human being. I see it in a very different light. I hope. I think misconception is. I think it just, to me, is. I try to understand from another person's angle, and for me, it's every time when I see a new client, for me, it's a new story. I have my judgment, but I'm willing to open with my judgment, to update my judgment, and to tune to the client's need, to understand what happened to that person. I might use some mindfulness techniques in the room, but it has to be something quite integrated it's a fluid with the session. It's not, you can't just let's do this 30 minutes body scan now. It doesn't flow. For me, it's just a bit more, it's a more art, and the craft art, and to understand the flow and the session, being attuned to the client's needs, and work integratively in a way.
And Jen, what would you say are the highlights of your career so far?
I don't know, Dennis. I don't think there's a highlight. Yeah, I'm just very. I'm humbled, just very honored by all the experiences I received. I would say perhaps from the research point of view, received the UKCP grant was really good. Also being part of a BPS, a few talks in BPS was really, really honored, that kind of recognition. But I think I just hope I can continue with the work and provide, quality services, and work with which is we support people and working with ethnic and minority community and then bridging the gap, help enhance their well-being. I don't know. I would hopefully talk to you again in 10 years' time. Perhaps there's more.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And is there a particular individual who has the greatest influence to your work, or is there a piece of work which kind of influenced the way you approach things?
My work, I think it's quite interesting because I grown up in China, so it's the conflict of Confucianism, Taoism, communist, and all sorts. Containing that conflict was a part of I grown up. So for me, I think integration comes both ways. I was brought up in a if you say Taoism culture, and so I'm very interested in also interesting Zen Buddhist. On the other hand, I'm also very interested in the this kind of cognitive behavior, the very practical approach. So I think for me, there's so many giants. I've had many. I don't want to name those, but I've met very inspiring teachers. I think it's just so I'm integrating from Eastern philosophy as well as Western approaches in a way, and I feel that's resonant with me, and that's a speak truth from me, and that's how I bring to the session working with a client.
And what would be your advice for those who want to follow your footsteps? Because a lot of people who would be watching this interview, they might be inspired to follow your path. So what's the big message from Zhendu?
Just go for it. And it's such a privilege to be able to support people. I come from a family, my grandfather's Chinese medicine doctor. So I have a few family members also working in the Chinese medicine, so believe a holistic healing, and that's how I believe as well. And I think whatever you are, whenever you are, just if you have some dreams, just go for it. And for me, as I come up to a circle, spend many years rebelling this and now come back to the circle, and I just felt I'm just grateful. I think if you're passionate in working in mental health, try to understand, passionate about understanding human nature, human psychic, and just go for it. It's not easy journey, but very rewarding journey.
Absolutely. And Jen, what do you think you would be doing if you didn't become a psychotherapist or a mindfulness teacher?
A very good point. I don't know. I mean, I previously work in a media field and a different kind of field. I don't know. That's not something I do fencing. So as a sports, and I also love gardening, and I do practice calligraphy. So I think something will be around. So now I will link all together. It's very Zen Buddhist kind of thing, and I think I will probably found that somewhere in that area as well.
And finally, Jen, the floor is all yours. Tell us what else is in the pipeline, and if people wanted to reach out to you, what platforms can they get in touch with you at?
So if you're a client, prospective client, and then you can get in touch with me from my website. Is www.zhendutherapy.co.uk. If you're a therapist interested in Chinese calligraphy enhancer therapy, also perhaps keep on my website. I'm interested in do some CPD next year and training for this approach. So yeah, if you're interested, keep in touch.
Yeah, exciting projects there, Jen do. So what I'll do is I'll pop in the link on the description notes. So for anyone who wants to learn about more about your work, and especially the calligraphy therapy, they can directly get in touch with you. Well, Jendu, it's a pleasure having you here on the VRH show, but unfortunately, time is against us. But I look forward to hearing more about your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you. And I hope your program go well, and best wishes.